The storm had already taken the roads, the power, and every excuse she had left. Sabine Thorne sat in a dead car on a black parking lot and could no longer feel her hands. The engine had quit 20 minutes earlier. The hazard lights had followed it into the dark, blinking slower and slower like something with a failing heart. Snow came sideways across the windshield in sheets, not falling so much as being thrown, and every gust rocked the town car on its springs. The valley had closed behind her, and the only warmth left in the world was the little that remained in her own body, and that was leaving too. She pushed at the door. It did not want to move. She put her shoulder into it, and it gave all at once, and the cold came in like a hand around her throat. "Hello?" Her voice went nowhere. The wind ate it. "Is anyone there?" Then a light. Low and swinging, close to the ground, coming toward her through the whiteout in a slow, steady rhythm that did not hurry and did not stop. A headlamp. Behind it, a shape, broad and bent into the wind, one arm up to shield its face. "Give me your arm." The voice was calm in a way that made no sense in all that noise. "Don't pull away from me. Give me your arm." She reached out. A gloved hand closed around her wrist, firm, sure, and she was up and out of the car and on her feet before she understood she had moved. The man got a shoulder under her and turned them both out of the worst of the wind, and for a second the headlamp swung up across his face and she knew him. She had heard that voice 2 weeks earlier, in her own conference room. On the afternoon she signed the papers that put him out of his home. "You're the man I evicted," she said. He did not stop moving. He kept them both walking, one steady step after another, toward a single warm window burning in a building that had otherwise gone completely dark. "Right now, I'm the man getting you inside," he said. "Walk. Before you keep going, guess who she calls first when the sun comes up? Some answers you will not see coming." 2 weeks earlier, the snow had not started, and Silas Wade still had keys to a door he was about to lose. At 4 in the morning, the Rothgate was quiet the way only an old building can be quiet, full of small sounds. Silas came down the back stairs in the dark by feel, because he knew every tread and did not need the light, and he let himself into the mechanical room where the boiler lived. It was an old sectional cast-iron boiler, older than he was, and the building depended on it completely. Silas set his coffee on the workbench and stood in front of it a moment listening. That was the first thing. Before he touched a gauge, he listened. A boiler told you what was wrong long before a gauge did, if you knew its voice, and Silas had known this one for 7 years. "Morning," he said to it. Not because it could hear him, but because it was 4 in the morning, and a person needs to say something. He read the pressure. He checked the water level in the sight glass and tapped the low water cutoff to make sure it was not stuck. He opened the fire door and looked at the burner flame, and watched its color until he was satisfied. Then he wrote the numbers in a spiral notebook that was soft at the corners from years of handling, the way he wrote them every single morning, so that if anything ever went wrong there would be a record of exactly when it began. The door opened behind him and let in a draft and the smell of fresh coffee. "You talk to that thing more than you talk to people," Reggie Salter said. "It listens better," Silas said. Reggie was 72 years old and had spent 40 of those years as a boiler engineer for the county school district before he retired into apartment 2C and never really stopped working. He carried 2 mugs. He handed one over without being asked, which was how Reggie said good morning. "Pressure's a little high," Reggie said, looking past him at the gauge. "I know, I'm watching it. The relief valve's tired. I ordered a new one." Silas took the coffee. "Doyle hasn't approved the purchase order." Reggie made a sound in his chest that was not quite a laugh. "Doyle?" He said the name the way you would say a word for weather that ruins crops. That's the tall one with the tablet. That's the one. He counted the radiators last week, Reggie said. Walked the whole building counting radiators into that tablet. Never said good morning to a living soul. They count what they can sell, Silas said. He drank his coffee. It's fine. I can nurse the valve another month. He could, too. That was the thing nobody in a suit ever understood about a building like the Rothgate. It did not run on money. It ran on a person who knew it, who came down at 4 in the morning and listened to a boiler, and wrote numbers in a soft notebook. And if you removed that person, no amount of money would keep it warm. Upstairs, at 6, the day began the way it always did. Dad? Etta stood in the kitchen doorway in her socks, hair a disaster, holding the laminated paper compass she had drawn in the 2nd grade. She carried it around the apartment the way other children carried a stuffed animal. She had drawn the 4 directions in marker and colored a red arrow in the middle, and then made him laminate it at the copy shop. And on the back she had written, in her careful 8-year-old letters, "So you always find your way back." "Morning trouble," Silas said. "Toast?" 2. 2 it is. He made her 2 pieces of toast with the good jam, and poured her a small glass of milk and sat across from her while she ate. And this was the best part of every day. And he knew it while it was happening, which is a rare thing. Outside the window, the sky was the flat gray of a coming storm, but that was days off yet, and inside it was warm, because he had made it warm. "You have your library book?" he asked. "In my bag." "Compass?" She held it up and rolled her eyes because, of course, she had her compass. She always had her compass. And he smiled and walked her to the bus and salted the front walk while he watched her go. That was who Silas Wade was, 2 weeks before the storm. A man the new owners had counted like a radiator and would not have been able to pick out of the lobby, and the whole building was warm because of him, and not one of them knew it. He had not always tended boilers. There had been another life, before Etta, before the Rothgate, when Silas was in his 20s and spent his weekends as a volunteer search and rescue technician in a mountain county 200 miles north. He had learned things there that a person does not forget. How cold works on a body, and how fast. How to move a frightened person who has stopped being able to help themselves. How to keep walking toward a light when everything in you wants to stop and rest, because stopping to rest in the cold is how people die. He had carried strangers off a mountain in weather that killed. He did not talk about it. It was simply in his hands, the way the boiler's voice was in his ears. He had met Mara at 27 and married her the same year, because when it is right, there is no reason to wait. Etta came 3 years later, and when Etta was 2, Silas and Mara took the live-in superintendent's post at the Rothgate, a free apartment and a small salary in exchange for holding an old building together. And it had been a good life. Small and warm, and enough. Then Mara got sick, and 3 years ago she died. And the whole shape of the world changed. Silas had thought about leaving after that, but Etta had already lost her mother, and he would not make her lose her home in the same year, her school, her friends, the walls she knew. So he stayed. He came down at 4 in the morning and listened to the boiler, and he raised his daughter, and he did not chase anything bigger, because the biggest thing he had was already sitting across from him at breakfast, eating toast with the good jam. "You used to pull people off a mountain," Reggie said to him once, watching him bring the boiler back from a rough night. "Now you pull a boiler back from the dead, same hands." "Warmer work," Silas said. He had survived the worst winter of his life already. He did not know another one was coming. Thorne Property Group closed on the Rothgate on the 2nd Monday in January. Sabine Thorne came to see it in person, which her people told her was unusual, because she trusted her numbers, and her numbers had never lied to her before. She was 34 and had built the firm into something that mattered, and she had done it by being disciplined and unsentimental and right. The Rothgate was, on paper, a simple thing. An aging building on valuable land. Warren Doyle, her vice president of development, had brought her the plan himself, and the plan was clean. Empty the building, take it down, build something worth 4 times as much. It practically runs itself, Doyle said in the lobby, tapping his tablet, not looking up. He was tall and expensively dressed and had a way of talking that filled a room so that no one else could. Deferred maintenance, sure. But that's an argument for the teardown, not against it. Every dollar we put into repairs is a dollar we set on fire. Her assistant, Priya Anand, stood at Sabine's elbow with a folder. Sabine took it and did not open it. She was watching a man on his knees at the base of a radiator in the corner of the lobby, working at a valve with a wrench, doing something careful and unhurried while the executives talked over his head as if he were part of the wall. "Who is that?" Sabine asked. "The superintendent," Doyle said, in the tone a person uses for a thing that has already been solved. "He's on the list." The man at the radiator stood up. He wiped his hands on a rag and looked at her directly, which almost no one who worked in her buildings ever did, and she was surprised to find she did not mind it. "You're the new owner," he said. It was not a question. Sabine Thorne. Silas Wade. He glanced at Doyle's tablet, then back at her. "While you're here, the east stairwell. There was a cheap renovation before my time, maybe 15 years ago, and whoever did it cut through a fire-rated wall and never closed it back up right. The fire separation on that stair is compromised. It's been that way for years and nobody wanted to pay to fix it." Doyle laughed, light and dismissive. "Sabine, I promise you this is not the venue." "I'm not telling you to save the building," Silas said. And he said it evenly, without heat, still looking at her and not at Doyle. "I know what the plan is. I'm telling you because people sleep behind that wall, that's all. What you do with it is your business." He nodded once, politely, and went back to his radiator, and that was the end of it as far as he was concerned. But Sabine stood there a moment longer than she meant to. She had come to sign off on a teardown. She had not expected to meet a man who would tell her a true and inconvenient thing, and then ask nothing at all in return for it. She filed it away, uneasy, and she did not yet understand why. Warren Doyle understood exactly why, and it frightened him. Because Warren Doyle had known about the east stairwell for months. He had known about a great many things: the compromised firewall, the structural cracking in the parking deck that he had photographed and then left out of the report. The plan he had sold Sabine depended on the building looking worse on paper than it was in the walls. The teardown numbers only worked if no one looked too closely, and there was exactly one person in the world who had looked closely, every single day, for 7 years, and written the numbers down in a soft notebook. So Doyle did what men like Doyle do. He moved the problem to the front of the line. "The superintendent's a liability," he told Sabine 2 days later, in her office, with the easy confidence of a man who has never been caught. "He's already agitating the tenants, telling them the building's unsafe, telling them not to cooperate with the transition. If we let him hang around for the notice period, he'll organize them, and we'll spend 6 months in hearings. Clean transitions start at the top. Serve him first, get him out, and the rest falls in line." Sabine looked at the recommendation in front of her. It was well written. Doyle's recommendations were always well written. Everything in her experience told her a disgruntled employee at the center of a difficult transition was a risk to be managed, and everything Doyle had said fit that shape. "He flagged a safety issue," she said. "He flagged a reason to stall," Doyle said smoothly. "That's what they do. Sabine, you hired me to make these calls easy for you. This one's easy. She signed it. She would think about that signature for a long time afterward. She signed it because the man in front of her had never lied to her before that she knew of, and because it was easier to trust the paper than to drive back up the valley and kneel down next to a radiator and ask a superintendent what he actually meant. She signed it and went to her next meeting. They served Silas in the lobby on a Thursday at the busiest hour, with tenants coming and going all around him. Yvonne Pratt was the one who had to do it. She was the on-site property manager, 41, and she had 2 kids and a mortgage and a job that Doyle had made very clear she would lose if this did not go smoothly. Her hands were shaking when she crossed the lobby with the envelope, and she could not quite look at him. Silas. She stopped in front of him. The lobby was full. Old Mrs. Fenwick was at the mailboxes. A young couple was wrestling a stroller through the door. Reggie was by the elevator with his newspaper. I have to. I'm sorry. She held out the envelope. Silas looked at it and did not take it right away. It's all right, Yvonne, he said quietly. They told me it had to be you first, she said, and her voice dropped so low that only he could hear it. I'm so sorry. They told me it had to be you first, or I'd be next. I know, he said. Give it here. It's all right. He took the envelope. He did not open it. He did not raise his voice or ask to speak to anyone or make a scene in front of the tenants who had watched him salt their walk every winter morning for 7 years. He simply folded the envelope once, put it in the chest pocket of his work shirt, and picked up the bag of ice melt he had set down, and went back out to the front walk because it was cold and the steps were slick and someone could fall. Reggie came and stood beside him on the step. They can't do that, Reggie said. You are this building. They can do exactly that, Silas said. He shook the ice melt out in an even arc across the top step. It's their building now. That night, he sat Ada down at the kitchen table and told her, carefully, in small words, that they might have to move to a new apartment soon, and that he would find them a good one, and that it would be all right. She was quiet for a while. Then she got up and went and got her compass off the fridge and put it in his hand. So, you find us a good way back, she said. He had to look at the wall for a second before he could answer her. That's the plan, trouble, he said. That's the whole plan. He had 2 weeks. He decided to use them the only way he knew how. He would not fight dirty. He would not organize the tenants into a mob or leak anything to a reporter or key Doyle's car in the lot, though a smaller man might have enjoyed all 3. He would keep the building warm and safe for the 14 days he had left in it. Because the tenants had not evicted him, the tenants had done nothing but trust him, and he was not going to punish them for what the owners had done. But there was one honest thing he could do, and he did it. Over 7 years, Silas had photographed and dated every real problem in the Rothgate. The compromised firewall in the east stair, the cracks in the parking deck that had grown a hair wider each spring, the wiring in the basement that a previous owner had done on the cheap. He had reported each one in writing, year after year, and been told each time that there was no budget. He had kept copies of all of it, the photographs and the reports and the dates, not as a weapon, but because a man who tends a building keeps records, the way he wrote the boiler pressures in a soft notebook every morning. Now, in the 2 weeks he had left, he finished it. He organized the whole record into one clean folder, every violation dated and photographed and cross-referenced to the reports he had filed and the refusals he had received. He was careful and he was thorough, and there was no anger in it at all. He was not building a case. He was refusing to let a lie stand where children slept. If you were in his shoes, 2 weeks from the street, would you have handed that folder over or burned it? Keep your answer in mind. When it was done, he made a second copy, and he gave it to Reggie. "Hold on to this," he said. "Not to use. Just so it exists somewhere that isn't my pocket. So the truth's on the record, even if I'm not here." Reggie took the folder in both hands, like it weighed something. "You should be running this company," Reggie said, "not sweeping its floors." "I don't want to run anything," Silas said. "I want the east stair to be safe and my kid to sleep in her own bed. That's the whole list." He signed and dated the last page of the folder on a Friday afternoon. That evening, the forecast changed. A system that had been sitting off to the west for days finally began to move, and the Weather Service put the whole valley under a warning, and by Saturday the word everyone was using was blizzard. It came in fast, and it came in hard. By Saturday afternoon the snow had started, and by Saturday night it was a wall of white and wind, and sometime after midnight the power went out across the entire valley. Not a flicker. A hard, total failure, the kind that does not come back in an hour. The Rothgate went dark, and the old boiler, which needed electricity for its pump and its controls, went silent, and the temperature inside the building began, very slowly, to fall. Silas was awake. Of course he was awake. He had been watching the storm since the first flakes, and he had already moved Etta's mattress into the warmest interior room, and layered her in blankets and told her it was an adventure, and she had believed him, because he had a way of making hard things sound like adventures. "You stay right here," he told her. "I have to go work. Mrs. Rivera from down the hall is going to sit with you." Mrs. Rivera was a nurse who worked nights and was, thank God, home. "You keep this on you." He put the compass in her hand. "So you find your way back," Etta said. "So I find my way back," he agreed. Then he went down into the cold and the dark to keep an old building and everyone in it alive. He worked the way he had been trained to work, methodically, one thing at a time, no wasted motion. The boiler was down and would stay down without power, so heat was not the fight. The fight was cold, and the enemy of cold was to gather people together and hold one room. He went floor by floor with his headlamp, apartment by apartment, knocking on doors, checking on the ones he knew were old or alone. Mrs. Fenwick, 90, on the 3rd floor. The Delgados, whose baby was 3 months old. Reggie, who was already up and already dressed and already helping. He brought them all down to the ground floor community room, which sat right against the mechanical room and its warm brick, the one room in the building he could keep above freezing, with a couple of propane heaters he kept for exactly this, and the residual heat still bleeding out of the boiler's iron. He got the older tenants into the middle where it was warmest. He counted heads. He counted them again. He got the east stairwell residents out, and he got them out the safe way, the long way around, because he knew exactly which stair was compromised, and he was not going to lose anyone to a wall he had warned about. It was somewhere in the middle of all this, moving between the community room and the front of the building with his head count in his mind, that he looked out through the lobby doors and saw the hazard lights of a car out on the lot, blinking slower and slower, going dark. He did not know whose car it was. It did not matter whose car it was. There was a person in the cold, and he was the only one coming. He put his head down and went out into the storm. "Why would you come back for me?" Sabine could barely get the words out. He had her on her feet and moving, his shoulder under her arm, and the wind was so loud she was not sure he had even heard her. "Because nobody else is coming," Silas said. "Walk." He got her inside. The lobby was black and cold, but it was out of the wind, and after the lot it felt almost warm. He did not stop there. He kept her moving, back through the dark building toward a doorway that leaked yellow light and the low murmur of voices, and he brought her into a room full of people. Her tenants. The people Warren Doyle had counted like radiators, wrapped in blankets around 2 propane heaters, and he sat her down in the warmth among them, and crouched in front of her and looked at her hands. "Can you feel these?" "A little." "Good, that's good actually. Keep them under the blanket, don't rub them." He looked at her a moment longer, and there was no anger in his face, which she found she could not stand. Anger she would have understood. Anger she deserved. "You picked a bad night to come see your asset." "I wanted to see it in the snow," she said absurdly, "and it was even true. I thought it would tell me something." "Did it?" She looked around the room. At the 90-year-old woman, at the baby, at the old man she now recognized as the one who had stood by the elevator with a newspaper the day they served the notice, at the propane heaters and the counted heads and the man crouched in front of her, who had every reason on earth to have left her in the car and had come out into a blizzard for her instead. "It's telling me something now," she said. He got up. He had 30 other people to keep alive, and he went and did it. And Sabine Thorne sat in a blanket in the middle of the building she had planned to tear down, and watched the superintendent she had signed away move through the dark room, checking on one frightened person after another, calm and certain and kind, and she understood all at once and completely exactly what she had signed, and exactly whose word she had taken over his, and exactly what kind of man each of them was. Guess what she does with everything she learns tonight before you keep going. By the time the gray light came up, the wind had finally begun to drop. The storm was breaking, and in a warm room in a dark building, every single resident was accounted for, alive and safe, and the woman who had erased his name owed him her life. She took out her phone. It had 1 bar. She made 1 call. She called her own office, and she told Priya Anand to pull every file Warren Doyle had ever touched on the Rothgate, and to have it all on the table by the time she got back down the mountain. The reckoning did not happen in a lobby or in a storm. It happened, the way these things really happen, in a conference room with paper. Sabine got down the valley 2 days later, when the plows finally opened the road. She had not slept much. She had spent the storm and the days after it doing something she had not done in years, which was to go and look at a thing with her own eyes instead of trusting a report. She had walked the east stairwell with a flashlight and seen the compromised wall exactly where Silas had said it would be. She had walked the parking deck and seen the cracks, and when she got back to the office, Priya had done as she asked. And Reggie Salter, it turned out, had a folder of his own, given to him by a superintendent who had said only, "So the truth's on the record even if I'm not here." They laid it all out on the long table, Doyle's report, with its careful omissions, Silas's 7 years of dated photographs and filed warnings. The two of them, side by side, told a single, undeniable story. Doyle had known. Doyle had always known. And Doyle had built a plan and sold it to his own CEO on the premise that no one would ever look. Yvonne Pratt was the one who said it out loud in the meeting, with her voice shaking the same way it had shaken in the lobby. "He told me if I didn't serve Silas first, I'd be the next one gone," she said. She had asked to be in the room. She had decided, somewhere in the storm, that she was done being afraid. "I have 2 kids. I did what he said, but I knew it was wrong when I did it, and I should have said so then, and I'm saying so now." "Thank you," Sabine said. "You just did the hardest part." The board convened that afternoon. Doyle sat at the end of the table and, even then, tried to talk his way out because it was the only thing he knew how to do, filling the room with his voice so that no one else could speak. It did not work this time. The evidence had been read. The vote was called. "The vote is 7-1, the chair said. Mr. Doyle, collect your things." Warren Doyle collected his things and left, and that was all. There was no shouting and no spectacle, and no one chased him down the hall. The door closed behind him, and the room simply moved on to the next item, and the man who had counted people like radiators was gone from the story, and no one in it ever spent another warm thought on him. Sabine did not let herself off so easily. She had signed the notice. She had taken the smooth report over the honest man. Nobody had forced her hand. She sat with that, and she did not look for anyone to tell her it was fine, because it was not fine, and pretending otherwise was a thing the old Sabine would have done. The lie that had looked like a spreadsheet turned out to be just a man's signature, and it was being erased. Vindication is a strange gift. It does not give back what the waiting cost. It did not give Etta back the night she had lain in the dark of the storm, holding a paper compass, not entirely sure her father was coming back up the stairs. It did not give Silas back the 2 weeks of not sleeping, the folded envelope in his shirt pocket, the careful small words at the kitchen table. Being proven right, Silas had said once, had never been the point, but the building was safe. The tenants had stayed, and a door he had thought he had lost was being reopened, and this time on honest terms. He sat with Etta on the third morning after the storm, both of them at the kitchen table, the good jam between them, the compass on the fridge where it belonged. "You came back," Etta said. It was not really a question, but she needed to say it. "I always will," Silas said. "You know how I know." She pointed at the compass and rolled her eyes, and he laughed. And it was the first time he had laughed in 2 weeks, and it felt like the boiler catching after a cold night. Reggie found him later at the boiler, listening to it the way he always did. "You did a hard, right thing," Reggie said. "In a world that mostly doesn't, I wanted to say I saw it." "You held the folder," Silas said. "That's not nothing, Reggie." "It's not everything either," Reggie said. "You're the one who wrote it down every morning for 7 years when nobody was watching. That's the part most people can't do." He put a hand on Silas's shoulder, brief and firm. "That's the whole ball game, son, doing it when nobody's watching." Sabine came back to the Rothgate a week later, and she did not come with a favor. The old instinct was to offer him something, a check or a title, and call the debt square. But she had watched this man refuse to gloat while she sat in a blanket, owing him her life, and she understood that a transaction was the one thing that would insult him. So she did not bring an offer. She brought the truth and a real choice. She found him in the mechanical room. Of course she did. "I killed the redevelopment," she said. "The teardown's dead. We're funding the real repairs instead, starting with the east stairwell. Done the right way this time, not the cheap way. Every tenant's lease is restored. Yvonne's staying on. And the superintendent's position is open." She paused. "If he wants it back. On his terms." Silas wiped his hands on a rag and considered her. "My terms are simple," he said. "I don't move my daughter again. She stays in her school. I come down at 4 in the morning and I listen to this boiler and I write the numbers down, and when I tell you a wall is unsafe, you send someone to look instead of signing a paper that says I'm lying." "That last part is going to be a firm policy," Sabine said. "I wrote it down myself." Something eased in his face. Not all the way, but some. "Then I want it back," he said. She should have left then. The business was done. But she did not leave, and neither did he make her. And after a moment she picked up the second mug that Reggie had left on the workbench, the way Reggie always left a second mug, and she poured herself coffee from Silas's thermos without asking, which was a small and enormous thing, and she leaned against the workbench and stayed. "It talks to you," she said, watching him read the gauge. "The boiler. Someone told me you talk to it." "It listens better than most people," Silas said. And then, because 2 weeks ago he would not have said it, and now he could, present company accepted lately. She smiled into the coffee. Etta decided the rest of it, in the end, the way children decide things, all at once and without ceremony. She met Sabine properly a few days later, and she studied her the way she studied everything, and then she went and got her compass, and instead of giving it to her father, she showed it to Sabine, which Silas had never once seen her do with anyone. He always finds his way back, Etta explained to her with great seriousness, as if imparting a family secret. You should know that about him, and he listens. He listens to you when you talk. I noticed that about him, Sabine said, just as seriously. It's rare. That's what my mom used to say, Etta said, and went back to her toast, and did not see the way both of the adults had to look at the wall for a second. There was no grand moment. There was no kiss under a streetlight, no speech. There was a man who had not been looking for anything, and a woman who had stopped believing she would find it, and a warm kitchen, and a child's verdict, and the slow understanding on both their parts that they had somehow, in the worst winter, stopped being alone. The building had its superintendent back, and maybe, in time, the two of them would have something more. At 4 a.m, the Rothgate was quiet again, full of small sounds, and Silas came down the back stairs in the dark by feel. He let himself into the mechanical room and stood in front of the boiler and listened before he touched a single gauge. It was running clean. The new relief valve, approved and installed the week before, held steady. He read the pressure and checked the sight glass and wrote the numbers in a soft-cornered notebook, the way he had every morning for 7 years, and would now for years more. Outside, the sun came up clean over new snow, and the light came in gray and then gold through the small high window of the mechanical room. Upstairs, a child slept under warm blankets with a paper compass on her nightstand pointing, as it always did, toward home. And on the front of the building, one warm window glowed against the dark brick, the light of a place that had almost gone cold and did not, because one person had never stopped tending it. The storm was gone. The building was warm, and the man they had tried to erase was exactly where he belonged.